Today on Sports Central, we go over our next team projection of this offseason, and it's going to be over the Mississippi State Bulldogs, the team that went 4-7 overall in the 2020 season. Not a terrible season for Mississippi State, but how will this team be in 2021, and will this team improve going into next season is what we're going over here today. We're going to go over a few players that Mississippi State will be losing. We're going to go over who they will be returning, and also looking at their schedule for the first time this offseason, starting out with the previous 6 games for Mississippi State. And once again, this team was 4-7 last season. This team played halfway decent, I'd say, down the stretch. I mean, this team kept it really close against teams like Georgia and Ole Miss. I mean, they only lost by a touchdown to both of those teams, which Georgia and Ole Miss both were playing pretty well towards the end of last season, especially Ole Miss. They were definitely a team that was pretty underrated in the later parts of last season. But they beat Vanderbilt 24-17, lost to Auburn as well 10-24, beat Missouri and Tulsa to finish out the season. So this team was 4-7. Even though the record doesn't look good, this team definitely did have some good talent last year. I mean, with the amount, like with KJ Costello, I mean, he was kind of a disappointment, but Mississippi State all around. I mean, even though they were 4-7, this team did, I think, have a decent amount of talent, and they just were on the wrong end of a lot of those games. Like, once again, they kept it very close against good teams like Georgia and Ole Miss. They were just on the wrong side of things. But first 5 games, this team was 1-4. Last 6 games, this team was 3-3. So you could argue that this team did improve over the course of last season. Like, once again, I mean, just looking at their previous 6 games, it was not a terrible finish to last season. As for your roster preview, though, of course, you return your primary quarterback, Will Rogers. He's coming back, and he was the main quarterback for this team last season. He put up definitely some better stats than KJ Costello in comparison. Will Rogers just put up right around 2,000 yards, 11 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and a 69% completion rate. So he overall did not have a terrible season at all for Mississippi State, but KJ Costello on the flip side, the transition for him did not work very well from Stanford to Mississippi State. He picked up just right around 300 or 1,300 yards and then 6 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, and a 64% completion rate. So KJ Costello just was a disappointment last season. I think we can all say that just looking back at it. I mean, he played pretty well at Stanford, and there was a lot of hype around him going into the 2020 season. I mean, for him, he just had a ton of potential going to an SEC team. But in the end, I think being in the SEC was actually detrimental to him. Like, the SEC is a whole different animal in comparison to the Pac-12, and really for KJ Costello, it just did not work out there. As for the running back core, though, of course, you return your top running back. In Marks, he's coming back. Dylan Johnson's also coming back. Both of the running backs combined for just right around 900 yards and 7 touchdowns. So really, they were not terrible last season. As for the receiving core, you return your top one there with Jaden Whaley. Cyrus Mitchell's not going to be coming back, however. But yeah, Jaden Whaley, that's going to be a big return there. He put up just right over 700 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's got some good potential moving forward. Mitchell on the flip side put up just over 500 yards. And then, of course, you got Austin Williams, your third wide receiver, who's also coming back. He put up just around 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. So overall, this team looks pretty good returning production-wise, I would say. I mean, especially for Will Rogers, he's the primary quarterback for this team, and this team definitely should be just fine with him. Like, once again, he put up far better stats than KJ Costello did in comparison to both of them last season. But as for the offensive line, you lose 2 on there. Watch out for that. You lose 2 defensive linemen, 1 linebacker, 1 in the secondary, so you lose 4 starters overall on the defensive side. So that's pretty much right around average, but definitely do keep that in mind moving forward. Chances of improvement in 2021, though, it's going to heavily depend on how Will Rogers does. Like, once again, he showed some good potential last season for sure. It's just a matter of whether or not he can improve on what he did in the 2020 season. But looking at your schedule, of course, you start off the season with a game against Louisiana Tech. You got NC State after that, Memphis as well. So those are your 3 non-conference games in the first part of the season. You got LSU to start off your SEC schedule. You got 3 brutal games to start off your SEC schedule. I mean, you got LSU, Texas A&M, and Alabama. This is a brutal schedule for Mississippi State. I mean, you got Louisiana Tech, which they're pretty good. They made it to a bowl game last season, I'm pretty sure. And then you have NC State, who's going to be a decent ACC team, probably a top half for sure. Memphis is one of the better non-Power 5 teams. And then you got LSU, Texas A&M, and Alabama right after that. So the first half of your season is just brutal. Really, I'd say the second half of the season is much easier for you in comparison to the first half. In the first half, it's just going to be one tough game after another. But in the second half, you got Vanderbilt. Should be an easy win there. Kentucky, Arkansas, Auburn, Tennessee State, and then Ole Miss as well. So, I mean, you still got to play Auburn on the road, Arkansas on the road, Ole Miss. But that looks much better in comparison to the first half of your schedule. But looking at some projections here, Louisiana Tech's going to be a win. I'm going to give you an easy win there. So you will start off the season with a 1-0 record. NC State's going to be a close one. Memphis will be close. LSU, Texas A&M can both be close as well. I probably favor Mississippi State only in the NC State matchup. I just feel like, the three other games there are just going to be really close, and I probably favor those teams otherwise. But, LSU especially. LSU was not very good last season, but this season they will be back, and they're going to be right back to being one of the better teams in the SEC. But Alabama then on October 16th, that'll be a loss. I just don't see this team getting the win in that matchup. But as for the second half of your schedule, Vanderbilt, that's going to be a win. Kentucky, Arkansas, and Auburn are both going to be pretty close. I'd probably favor Mississippi State in that Kentucky matchup. Arkansas is pretty much a 50-50 matchup. Then Auburn, of course, with that being on the road, that could be a tougher one there. Tennessee State will be a win. Ole Miss will be close as well. So I do see this team having a decent season. I do have you guys going to a bowl game at 6-6, being your projection, which I'd say 6-6 would be a good season for Mississippi State. Like, I understand that 6 wins isn't always ideal, but for this team right now, I just feel like 6-6 would definitely be a good season. 8-4 is going to be your ceiling, and then 4-8 will be your floor. So even though there's a high ceiling for Mississippi State, there's also a pretty low floor there at 4-8. But for Mississippi State, once again, I do see this team making it to a bowl game. I just like Will Rogers. Once again, he's going to have a very huge impact on how this team does. If Mississippi State does well, Will Rogers will definitely have had a big impact on that. But anyway, let me know your thoughts and comments below on the Bulldogs and your record predictions and all of that down in the comments. I appreciate you guys all watching. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. I'll see you later.